Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Scales built by interval or modal distance, this time focusing in on the major scale, otherwise known as the Ionian mode. So get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin'. And this is where we deconstruct the Excel part of excelling at rockin' so we can practice just that part. In Excel, if you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we'll basically build this from a blank worksheet. But if you do have access, 4 tabs down below, fretboard, example, practice blank, the fretboard tab having a simulated fretboard we will refer to, the example tab having in essence the answer key, the practice tab has pre-formatted cells so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay because we'll be working in the blank tab, building this from scratch, practicing both our Excel formatting skills for formatting's sake, as well as our music skills at the same time. Let's go to the fretboard tab just to remember our objective, which is to visualize the fretboard in the most conducive way to movement around the fretboard from a functional standpoint as possible, that being to see the fretboard as a territory or map of the territory having 7 continent locations on it. We're above the fretboard. Our head is up here above the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling. We visualize the fretboard spinning around like the planet, rotating around, assigning 12 degrees of rotation, typically working in the 4th degree of rotation, this being equivalent to the notes in the musical alphabet, this 7 notes for the key of C, but we could be working in C sharp, D, D sharp, and so on and so forth. The point is, once we determine that visualization, I no longer want to name all the notes by the note names. I want to name them by the equivalent of the continent names, which is similar to the Nashville number system. The Ionian is the 1, the 4 is the Lydian, the 3 is the Phrygian, and so on and so forth. The ones in the middle are what I'm going to equate to the oceans, the things that we go through in order to get to the continent destination locations. That will be the easiest way to really functionally visualize the fretboard. But remember, the scales kind of throw us off because of the scale degree terminology. We went over the intervals in detail in a prior section. We're going to look at them again, but this time we want to look at the intervals as a way to build our scale. So in other words, when we're working in the guitar, there's basically 3 main ways that you can build the scales that you're going to be working in, the notes, the 7 notes. One is in a guitar, most people learn by shape. So we're going to learn the open positions over here, and then we might learn the caged system. We might break the fretboard into 5 basic shapes along the fretboard and just learn those shapes. Another way is to use the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, which is less common on the guitar because we're not on one string as we are basically on a piano. So people have difficulty oftentimes applying the formula as they go up the string. So right, it would be whole. So if I'm here, we can say it's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. But to see that, we have to be able to visualize what it means to do a whole or half step as we go between the strings. So that kind of throws people off, but that's a good thing to learn to do. And then the third way is by interval distance from a particular point, meaning instead of measuring whole, 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 half, or what, I'm not, sorry, I didn't say that right, but instead of measuring each distance from each point we're on, we're going to measure all the distances from this point. And that's kind of like I would imagine you put a compass, like when you draw a circle with a compass and you put the little pointer in the middle of the circle and then you draw the circle around the compass. That's kind of what I imagine this method being. We're going to say this is going to be our center point. I'm going to build this entire shape from the distances of this center point. And that helps us to compare the intervals from each of these distinct areas. Now remember, as we do this, you're going to think that they're different scales because that's what we're trained to think. We have different scales, but really all we're saying is we're measuring all the same notes from a different point, from different points in the same collection of notes. And that's what an interval comparison is doing. So if I make a Mixolydian scale then, or mode, usually they're going to say, I want to make this 5 the 1. And then I'm going to measure everything from here as though it is the 1. That's confusing. Why? Because if I go from this Mixolydian to this Aeolian, the distance is the same. It's still an XA modal range. It doesn't matter if I'm in the Mixolydian or if I'm in the Ionian, right? If I'm going to measure from here to here, the distance is always the same. I don't want to change it, right? That's the point. That's the thing we want to get in our mind. I want to be able to say every distance is always the same, you know, from each of the node to the other node. And so try not to get thrown off by the renaming of the nodes with the scale degree concept. That's what we want to keep in mind as we do this. All right, so we're going to go to the example tab. We're going to build this out piece by piece. We're going to reconstruct our musical alphabet just so we can practice building our table there. We'll reconstruct the notes that we're going to pull out from it. And then I'll reconstruct our normal naming convention. But this naming convention is going to show us all of the intervals within an octave going forwards and backwards. And we'll talk about going backwards more later. But what we want to do that's different this time is just pick the octaves that don't land us in the ocean for each of the, if we start from each of the nodes, I just want to compare the octaves that don't land us in the ocean. And that gives us a comparison to all the different starting points, so we can compare all the different starting points, all the different modes and scale degrees in essence, if you want to use that term. So let's go to the blank tab. Let's build this thing out. So I'm going to start this out by selecting the entire sheet. We're going to right click on it. I'm going to format the cells. Let's format these cells. I'm going to start with currency, negative numbers. Let's make them red and bracketed, and $sign. I always start with currency. I'm an accountant, I guess. You know, I could start with accounting. No, I do currency. I don't know. That's what I do. And then I get rid of the decimals to start off with. I'm going to say OK. Home tab, font group. I'm going to make it bold. All right. Now we're just going to reconstruct our musical alphabet, just so we can see this starting from scratch. I'm going to say the numbers go from 1 to, I'm going to give our notes numbers. That's helpful to do. Why doesn't anyone do that? Because I don't know. It's crazy. It's just insane that no one does that. But we're going to stop the insanity right here, right now. I'm just going to put this a letter for the abbreviation. So this is going to be, the 1 is the A. I'm not going and so I'm just going to give a numbering to it. AB is going to be A sharp or B flat. And then we have the B, and then we have the C. There's a natural half step, they call it. It's not really a natural half step, remember. It's just because we started off with the key of C, 7-note collection before adding the other notes, which really is misleading. It's impossible not to be misleading. Continuing on, we have another what they call natural half step between the E and the F because of the formula, the way it falls out. And G, and then GA. All right, so there's going to be our 12 notes. I'm going to combine them together with a letter, let's say both. Let's just say both. Technical term here. And then I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the A. Let's put the A first and the 1. So the and we'll tie it together and we'll call it A1. Just like this steak sauce. Not that I'm advertising for them or anything, but if they're out there and they want me to give me money to say A1, I will say A1 in the presentation. All right, let's copy. I'll copy that. Do that later. Let's do this. It's going to be equal to the 1 up here because I'm just going to make it repeat, and it'll copy it down. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the 1 up top. I'm going to copy that to the right with the fill handle. I'm doing this fairly fast because we've done it before. Let's make this blue up top. This is the first round. And so I'm going to hit that drop down. I like that blue. It's in the more colors standard. It's that blue right there because it's a happy blue. It makes me feel good. And so that's why I use it. It makes me feel like I'm in the ocean or looking at the calm blue sky, calm blue ocean, calm blue ocean. The world is crazy, but we've got the calm blue ocean here. I'm not worried about it. Why are people doing crazy things? Calm blue ocean. Then I'm going to hit let's do it again. This time, we're going to make it green. Okay. What are people doing? Calm blue. It's green now. I'm getting stressed out. It's not quite as calm. That's okay, right? Calm. Now we're back up to the calm one. Calm blue ocean. I'm going to say this is going to, let's double click in here and make it small. Okay, so then we're going to apply out our whole half formula to pick the notes that we're going to be working in. So we're going to start with the C, degree of vision. We could do this from any note, of course, but we're doing it from C. So this is what they started with. This is why these are what they call the natural notes, which is, again, very misleading language, but we see what they mean. We're going to be pulling these out, and then we're going to go an octave up here. So I'll make this a different color just to note that we're continuing up, because it could go around in a circle or continue up, and then it would repeat again at this one, right? So let's make this one like orange this time, and so that we can see that it changes there. So we're going up the second lap around the circle, and then I'll make this one above it yellow up here. Is that a good way to do it? I should have made this, if I do it this way, this should be orange maybe. now I'm just, and then this should be yellow. Let's do it that way this time. I think that's a better way to do it. So you can see one round in the middle. Now let's name those nodes. Those nodes are going to be the Ionian, and then the Dorian, and then the Lydian, and then the Mixolydian, and then the Aeolian, and then the Locrian. Wait, no, that's not right. I missed one. Wait a second. I'm on this was the Dorian. The Phrygian, I missed the Phrygian. Let's just move all these down. Trying to copy this from my cheat sheet. This is going to be the Phrygian, and then the Lydian, then the Mixolydian, then the Aeolian, and then the crazy Locrian. All right. So then I can make these black and white on the header. So we're going to go font group. Let's make this black. Let's make it white on the lettering. And we'll make this bordered right there, down here, borders. All right, let's also give it the abbreviation with the letters. I'm going to just make that an I. This is going to be a D. This is going to be a small p, a Y, an X instead of an M, because M is too like major or minor-ishy looking. And then this is the crazy N for Locrian. I didn't want to get the L's because L's look like ones. That's our lettering system. So it's nice and easy. As easy as the Nashville number system, right? We got these nice small letters. We don't need to know Greek. I'd like to learn Greek because I want to read the Iliad in its original context, because that would be cool, but we don't need to know the Greek. So anyways, this is going to be a collection of notes. Will be C. Let's just put them in order now, not counting the oceans. If I remove the oceans, even though the oceans are nice, calm, and blue, we're just talking continents. The oceans are nice, calm, and blue, but you don't want to be in there too long, or else the sharks get you. If you're just loitering in the ocean, that's when the sharks get pissed. You're like, hey, dude, we were cool with you being here for a little while, but now you've been loitering in my ocean, so we don't want to spend too much time there. We'll just get to the continents. Okay, so then if I repeat that, let's make this orange. We'll make these orange, bracketed. We'll make it orange, and then this is going to equal the one up top. We'll copy that across, and then we'll bring that down. All right, we'll make that one yellow to see the two. We're going up another, so we like going around in a circle. All right, I'm going to double click and make those skinny. All right, so now let's just put a list. I'm going to take this skinny. I'm going to format paint that to the eye, so we have a skinny eye. Okay, so now let's just list out the number of steps I can take. So if I start on this C and there's 12 notes, how many steps could I take before getting back to the C? Well, I could go 1 step. I could start on the 0 step, 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step, right? Up to repeating the octave or just shy of repeating the octave. So that's going to be, 11 steps if I'm going in the forward direction. So I'm going to say half steps, let's say. And so this is going to be a distance of, let's say, we'll start on 0 and then 1. And then I can go up 11 steps from any point, 11 steps up. Now we could keep going. That would be going through another octave, but we're going to be working just within 1 octave at this point in time, visualizing it kind of like it's going around in a circle instead of a note number line going infinitely up and back. Okay, so let's now all we can do is just kind of list out now what are the normal naming conventions. So we went over these in a prior section. I'm just going to put them down fairly quickly now. So normally it's going to be a 0 note away, perfect first. Now most people don't say 0 notes away, but I recommend doing that particularly on the guitar so we remember that this is a measuring term. And then I'm going to say this is a 1 note away, and they call that a minor second because it's not in the major scale. Now we'll be able to analyze this more clearly now because we're going to be looking at the scales and just look at the ones that are in each of the scales. And so hopefully this naming convention will be even more clear once we do that. This will be a 2 note away major second. So this was a minor second, 1 note away minor second, 2 note away major second. Hopefully I said that right. 3 note away minor third, small m, because it's once again not in the major scale. This would be a 4 note away major third because it is in the major scale. Notice what's happening. They just made the minors is kind of like the ones that are in the ocean from the perspective of the major scale. If you went 3 notes up, in other words, you land in the ocean, therefore it's not going to be major or perfect, but rather it's going to be like 2.5, right? But they don't use 2.5, they're going to make it a flattened third. Okay, so this is going to be a 5 note away perfect fourth. Why is it perfect? Just because they thought that was a cool interval, but the perfect means it's in the major. And that 6 note away diminished fifth, that's the super weird one. Why is it super weird? Because the 7 note away perfect fifth, they had to name perfect instead of major because they thought that was a super solid interval, which it is, but that meant that they couldn't name the 6 note away minor because the 7 is perfect and minor means, like a 0.5 less, and so they had to call it a diminished fifth, which is kind of ugly. And then an 8 note away minor 6 because that's not in the major, 9 note away major 6 because that is in the major, and then a 10 note away minor 7 because that's not in the major, and then an 11 note away major 7 because that is in the major. Now, that's just the list. Now, we could go in the opposite direction, in the negative direction. So I'm going to add that now because I want to include that in my ranges as we build our table, but we're not going to talk about going in the negative direction until a future presentation in more depth. But I'm going to select this whole thing and pull it down and say, what if we go in the negative direction? If 0 is right there, I could go from 0, -1, -2. Let's select those two and see if it'll let me copy that up. Zoom. Goes to 12. I only want to go to 11. So let's delete this last one. I'm just going to select these 3, right click, delete, shift cells up, por favor. All right, now when I go in the negative direction, you would think that I would have to make this the negative one note away, negative second modal scale degree, but we don't have negative scale degrees. So what we do is we talked about in the prior presentation is I'm gonna imagine if I went clockwise around the circle, if I go 1 back, 12 minus 1 would be 11 forward, and I know that would be a major 7. So I'm gonna imagine the major 7 could go 1 back, or it could go forward. So what I'd like to do is pull the major 7 bit over here and then add the -1 instead of the 11. How can I do that? So let's do it this way. We can do it piece by piece, right? So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to, let's say, right. I'm going to pull the right bit of that, and then comma, and I want to take 2 characters of it. This is where we're getting into fancy Excel stuff. So that would be a major 7, right? And it doesn't pull in the 11, and then I want to add the 1 next to it. So then that would just simply be, of course, equal to the 1. Now, if I put those 2 together, I'm going to select in here and say copy, enter, so it doesn't, and then paste, and then go in here and say copy this bit, copy, and then go back in here and put this by saying and, tying it together to this. Boom. So now you've got a -1 major 7. All right. Let's copy this up. Boom, boom, boom. Copy that up, and there we go. So now we've got a -2, minor 7, -3, major 6, -4, minor 6, because 12 minus 4 would be like 2. That would be 12 minus 4 would be 8, right? So that 8 would be a minor 6 going forward. So it's -6. Okay, you see the idea? Okay. So let's make this one like orange because it's in the middle. That's our midpoint. And then we'll make this, this will be intervals, let's say, standard intervals. As imperfect as they are, we will work with the tools that we're given. No matter how many times I have to smack that blunt rock against the tree to try to get me some firewood, because the thing is blunt, but that's the tools we're given. So I will smack that tree until it, even though I'm hitting it with a rock. Okay, let's select these 2, and I'm going to make these smaller. Okay, so now that we have that, let's start to build our interval comparison, but just looking at the intervals. If we start on each of the modes that are actually in that don't land us in the ocean. So for the major, we'll start with the major, which of course are just the ones that don't land us in the ocean, meaning the majors and the perfects, because that's what we, okay, so let's select this one. I'm going to take the skinny, home tab, format painter, make a skinny. All right, so this is going to be, let's call this scale degree versus, I'm going to compare this to modal distance. Now this is the problem, because the scale degrees, and again, it just is what it is. People get mad when you say it, but the scale degrees are off by 1. Everything is messed up because they're going to make the thing that you're measuring from the first point of measurement, like measuring the top of someone's head to try to measure the distance from the top of their head to the basketball hoop. You don't measure foot 1 as their head, but that's what we do, right? So we call that a scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What would be better is if we started at 0 and then said there's a distance of 1 foot or 1 modal half step up, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, neither of these measuring terms are perfect, because as we look at these 7 notes, there is an uneven distance between them if we look at it from the perspective of the notes. But because of the formula, but we're always going around in a circle, so it's still a measuring tool, right? So this one's just measuring as though that is the 1. We're going to start with, and this one's measuring from the next one like you would normally measure. That's going to cause all kind of problems that we saw in prior section. But this time I just want to compare then the ones that don't land us in the ocean, so that we can compare how many steps, what scale degree, and how many modal half steps forward can we go from each of the 7 continents and still land on another continent. Okay, from each continent, how many times around the block can I go and still land on the continent, not including the oceans? Okay, that's what the comparison's doing. Let's do the Ionian. We're working in Ionian. I'm just going to say this equals the Ionian, and I'm going to call this then the modal half steps versus the note half steps. Okay, so if we're talking about the, Actually, that's not right. Let's first add the modal range. The modal range, and I'm going to say the modal range, we're going to start from an Ionian to an Ionian. Or in other words, we can think about the modal range as the start and finish. Start, end. So this, let's say it this way. If I make the Ionian the 1, then I'm going to say the 1, I'm going to equal the 1, copy it all the way down. That'll be what it is all the way down. And then on the end point, I'm going to say this, we're going to start on the 1 equals the 1, but then we're going to say that I'm going to have the D is the 2, so this will be equals this plus 1. So I'm going to copy that all the way down. So these are the combinations that we can have. A 1 1, a 1 2, a 1 3, a 1 4, a 1 6, a 1 7, I mean a 1 6, a 1 7 from the concept of like a Nashville number system. Those are the distances between the continents if I'm measuring all the time from the 1, which is the Ionian node. Not a scale degree, we're talking about the node of Ionian. All right, so then let's do it this way. We're going to say then that means that I can pick the Ionian by saying this is going to, I'm going to find that 1 in this collection I'm going to find that 1 in, let's do this better. Let's make another column here. I'm going to right click and insert. And let's do another one and make this a skinny. And I'm going to make this a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, and actually, let me do it over here. I'm going to undo that. Maybe it would be better if we did that here. So if I say insert here, and we say this is a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7. So then I can say, let's do this. This is going to be equal to this 1. Actually, I'm doing X lookup equals X lookup. We're going to find this 1 and then comma. Where do you want to find it? I want you to find that 1 in this array. And then comma, what do you want us to return then? I want you to return this array. The 1 equals the I. In other words, that should give me an I. So there it is. Okay, and then I can double click in here and say I want the arrays not to move, therefore I'm going to make them absolute. Selecting F4, putting a $sign before the letter and the number here, $sign before the letter and the number there in that range, $sign before the letter and number, $sign before the letter and the number here. Okay, and then I do want it to copy to the right, so I can just copy this over now, boom. And this did the same thing here. So that looks good. And let's copy this down then. Let's copy it down. That's going to give us the I all the way across. So that makes sense. And then it's an ID, an IP, an IY, an IX, an IA, and an IN, because the N is the 7. So there's some fancy Excel maneuvering right there. Let's go ahead and make this top bit black and white for the headers. Black and white, and then I'll center that. Let's make this one green on the outside because this is going to be applying to all of the sections on the table. So I'm going to say bordered and make it the light green. And then this one, I'll make this let's make this a dark green. I'm going to make this a dark green. We're going to get fancy with the colors here. And then white. And then I'm going to try to, as we go through, I'm going to make this dark green as well. And then I'm going to put borders around this. And let's keep it at that. Let's put borders around this whole thing. Let's select this whole thing. Double click to fix the size. All right. Now this one I want to delete this. And I want this to be smaller because the modal range, I'm going to say it goes through both. So this modal range needs to be left aligned, then that'll work. So I want it to be, okay, Ionian modal range. All right, I think that's right. Okay, so then, and then this is still the modal range with the start and end point from a number perspective. Okay, and then, so then we can see this as the distance now between all of these nodes. So now we're going from I to I, in other words. So if I say this is I'm going to call it a modal half step, and let's do it from the second one because it makes more, so I can see a difference here. So in other words, if I'm on the second node, what's the distance I went from one to the second? If I'm here to here, that would be the second minus the first. So the modal distance is 2 minus 1, clearly. But the scale degree, let's just call it SD, is always off by 1 because I would have made that the 1. So let's say the scale degree is always going to be this plus 1. It's always going to be off by 1. All right? But what are the actual, the note distance, the actual notes, which I'm going to say note half steps, are going to be then, if I went from the Ionian up, I went 1 modal half step, or the second scale degree, but I actually went 2 notes up, right? So it's going to be 2 notes up. How can I, so that needs to be a 2. Now I'm going to start to build up like a fancy formula. It's like, how can I do this so I can copy it across? I can see that it's 2, but what I'd like to do is say it's going to be this number 6 minus this number 4, and that would give us a 2. So basically, how could I do that? Well, let me see if I can map this out. I can find this D right there. Is this D right here? And I want that to give me the 6, and then I can use this I right there to give me the 4, and then subtract the 2. So let's build it one thing at a time. So if I say this equals X lookup, good old X lookup, and I'm going to say I want you to find this I want you to find this second I. It's the second I. Well, not the I. Let's find this D. Find that D, comma. Where do you want us to find it? We want you to find it in this array. And then, comma, what do you want us to return? I want you to return this related array, meaning find the D and give me the 6. So it should return the 6. Let's pull this over here just to make it a little closer. And then let's do another one. The second bit is going to be the 4. So I want to say this equals X lookup. And I want to say, okay, give me this Ionian this time. Find that Ionian, comma, find it in here, and then comma, and then return to me what is in here. What is in here? Down to here. Okay, and it should give me a 4. And then I could subtract the 2, and it'll give me the 2 that I want. And I should be able to copy and paste that. So let's double click in here. So I got something, I think I swallowed a fly or something. Hold on a second. I washed it down with some coffee. So I should be good now. All right, so if we double click in here, I'm gonna make this, the ranges, I don't want them to move when I copy them down. So I'm gonna say F4, $sign before the letter number, F4, $sign before the letter number, F4, and F4. Enter, same thing here, F4, 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 enter. So then I can go in here and I'm gonna copy this whole bit. I'm gonna copy this whole thing, enter, and put it right there. And that gives me that bit. And then I'm gonna take this whole bit and I'm gonna copy it, not including the equal sign, copy, enter, go into here, and then I'm gonna put it at the end, but I wanna say minus this whole bit. And that should give me the 2. Now it's still not perfect because I'm gonna have to do a little bit even fancier stuff, but you can see how you can kind of build this out outside of the formula. All right, so if I copy that down, then this would be 2, which is gonna be the modal, the third, the Phrygian minus the 1 gives me a 2. And then the scale degree would be off by 1, so I'd add 1. And then the note half step is going to be pulling then the Phrygian, which is the 8, minus the Ionian, which is 4, and that gives us a 4. Let's copy it down again. So now we're going to say, okay, that's going to be modal half steps, 4 minus 1, or Lydian minus the Ionian. The scale degree is off by 1, so we add 1. And then we're going to say, give me the Lydian. So it's taking this Lydian, the 9, minus the 1, or Ionian. 9 minus 4 is 5. Copying that down again. We're going to say, okay, now we're going to take the 5 minus 1. The Mixolydian minus the Ionian is 4. Scale degree is off by 1, so we add 1 to it. And the distance is now taking the Mixolydian, the 11, minus the Ionian, or 4, for 7. And then we go down again and say, okay, now we're on the 6 minus 1, which is Aeolian minus the Ionian. Scale degree is off by 1, so we add 1 to it. But now what happened, it's off by 1. Why? Because it's taking this A down here instead of the A up top. Now, if I copied, you know, the easier solution to this might be for me to just look at it within one, but I'm still going to have it possibly be a negative because it could be like later it's going to be. So there's no real way around it. So now I have to say, okay, how can I fix that? That's a problem because what happened is it took this A, which is the 1 which repeats now, right? The 1 is repeating and it's taking it minus the 4. So okay, so what I could do then is I basically want to add 12 to this, right? So I'd like to say do that whole thing plus 12, and then it would come out properly. So that's what I'm looking for. But if I just do that, that's going to mess up my formula when I copy it. So how can I do this? Okay, so I can go in here and say let's get rid of this 12, and I'm going to embed another if function. So I'm going to say if tab this whole thing, I'm going to copy it. Copy. If that whole thing is, if that whole thing is greater than, let's say -1. So then, what do I want you to do? I'm going to paste that whole thing, because all it's saying is just saying do that thing. If it's not negative, right? But what if not? I'm trying to move this thing. But what if not? If not, then comma. So now we're on the last one. Enter. Then do that whole thing, but add 12. And then enter. It should close it up. So now it's at 9. Let's see if that messes up. If I copy that backwards up to here, I should come up to the same thing. So now I've got a long, ugly formula, but hopefully you kind of see how we constructed it step by step, right? And then I can copy that down lastly here, which is going to be saying that we went 7 minus 1, or Locrian minus Ionian. It's going to be 7 scale degrees, which is 11 steps away if I look at the Locrian, meaning if I go from here to the Locrian 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Right. All right, let's copy it up 1, 2, because the 0 means that we didn't go any steps away. So that would be 0. Let's make this black, white, and centered. Black, white, and centered. I'll select these 3, double click to make them as tight as possible. And then I'll put some borders around these bad doggies. And let's make this one black and white as well. Okay. So now I'm going to focus in on this one. I'm going to make this yellow for now. And let's see. I wish you could see the whole, I'd like to see the whole thing up there. But that's going to, let's not do that. So I'll make this yellow for now. And then the next thing I want to do is the scale interval versus the modal distance. Let's make that black and white. We'll make this black, white, and centered. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to look at from the scale intervals, I'm just going to look at this column and look at the modal distance. So this is a 0 modal distance, 0 notes away. Therefore, I'm going to have it pull in the P1. So that's going to be just simply equal to, this is an good old X lookup. I could use more arrays more effectively, but I tend to do it the old way still. So it's an X lookup like this. Find that 0 in this whole array, and then I'm going to say comma and return to me then this whole array. Boom. Okay, and then so enter. There it is. That's good. Now I'm going to double click on it so I can copy it down and make these absolute so it won't change the arrays when I copy it down. F4 $ before the letter and number, F4, F4, F4 $signs before the letters and numbers, enter. Now I can copy that down. Copy that down. So if I go 2 notes away, as we saw, that was a major second when we went over here, right? That's a major second. 4 notes away, we call that a major third. 5 notes away are a perfect fourth, and so on. So notice that these are the interval names that will not land you in the ocean. But I'm including the notes. Most people don't. So most people don't say a 4 note away major third. They just say major third, and you have to know it's a 4 note away. But I would recommend saying 4 notes away. So these are the ones from the perspective of the major scale, which is what the whole interval system was built on, that don't land you in the ocean. And so we'll compare them then to if we start on any other continent and we took the same number of steps from both a modal half-step perspective or scale degree perspective, which are similar, as well as the note perspective, to see how many steps we can take from another node and land in the ocean or not, to see how different it is from the distance around it, right? What continents are around it, how far away are they? All right, let's look at the modal distance by comparison. So from a modal distance perspective, let's take the second one again, because the first one sometimes is a little confusing when we're not moving anywhere. We're on the same point. So from a modal standpoint, I'm going to say that there's 2 notes of comparison or areas of comparison. We now have the modal half step. So let's make that highlighted. And then we have the note half step. So this time I'm gonna tell you where I'm measuring from. So let's do this one this time. We're gonna say this is gonna. So you would think it would be then the 2 notes away from the Ionian node, and then it's gonna be it's gonna be 4 notes away from the Ionian node, and it's gonna be then 2 modal half steps. So you would think that would be a 4 note away Ionian second. So notice that's more specific, because the major, although makes sense when we're talking about the major scale, doesn't actually give you any new information if you know the 4 notes away. It doesn't really help you at all, really, right? It'd be better to say it's a 4 note away third scale degree, or a 4 note away from the Ionian. But if you're going to name something there, it'd be nice if you named the point that you're actually talking about. Otherwise, you could just call it either a 4 note away from that point or a third scale degree, which would be a second modal half step away from that point, right? But you need to know the point, anyway. So, but then the question is, well, how can I do this in such a way that I can copy it up and down? Well, I could do it this way. I can say that 4, that's going to be equal this 4. And then I want to tie that to with simply an and tie that to the Ionian, which is going up and down the whole way, because that's always the point that we're measuring from. And then tie that as well to this 2, which is the modal half steps. And then enter. And then now I can copy that up and down. So now we can just go down, and we can copy it up. All right. So this is kind of like the baseline that we're going to be starting from. The Ionian mode. This would be the standard thing that we measure everything to typically when we use our scale degrees. But I would think it would be better to really drop the idea, the significance of the letters, and instead add the number of notes, the distance. That's the important thing. And then And then I think, and then if you want to put something in the middle, so in other words, I would rather call this a 2-note away second, right? The major doesn't really help me if I know it's a 2-note away. That's the thing that should tell me the quality, not the big M. The big M is doing nothing really for me, right? I mean, I would like to, how do I know it's in the major? Do I need the M to tell me that? No, I know it because it's 2 notes away. And I know that that distance from the Ionian node lands me on a continent. I don't need an M to tell me that if I have the number of steps. And then I can easily compare that to a different, if I take 2 steps away from a different continent, right? And like the Phrygian or something like that, to see if it lands me in the ocean. That's how I want to be basically comparing it. And so I would, and then the second one, again, is the measurement tool is off because it's the scale degree, so you're counting the scale that you are on. I'd rather drop that by 1 and measure from that scale. So I'd rather call it a 2-note away from the node that I'm talking about, in this case, the Ionian node, which would be the first modal half step away, or the second scale degree, if I make that the one. So I think notice this second term allows you to use either side, right? I could call it a 4-note away Ionian modal distance, or you can call it an Ionian second modal half step, which would be the third scale degree. I could drop either side of this and it still works. You can kind of do that over here with the 4-note away major, right? But really, all you need is the 4-note away to say it's the major and then major third. Anyway, we'll get back to that later. It doesn't work going backwards, by the way. We already talked about that. But I'm gonna make this way. I mean, this one works going backward. This one doesn't work going backward. But we'll get into that later. That's going to be the general outline. And then in future presentations, we'll do the same thing and we'll compare the other modes, but just looking at the intervals that don't land us in the ocean. So we can look at the steps that we don't land in the lava, right? From all the different continents, all the different islands, all the different land masses within our structure.